Some facts never leave you, like how radiation made a man's skin fall off, or how an elephant took so much LSD that he ended up somewhere else entirely. I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 facts you'll wish you never heard, but good luck on hearing them now. In 1962, researchers at the Oklahoma City Zoo decided, for some reason, to test LSD on an elephant. And I say some reason because I can't really think of a single way an elephant's reaction to acid would have told us anything useful about humans. Their test subject, a 7,000-pound bull elephant named Tusco, was given 297 milligrams of LSD. For context, that is over 3,000 times a typical human dose. 5 minutes later, Tusco collapsed, started convulsing, and lost control of his body. They tried everything to save him, including the use of tranquilizers, but he died about 90 minutes later. Besides being inhumane, the whole thing became a very public disaster. It was basically just a horrible experiment with no actual point. And thankfully, no one ever tried it again. Okay, this next one is awful, and unfortunately, pretty common. When ducks are raised in cramped indoor spaces with poor ventilation or bad nutrition, they've been known to get so stressed or bored that they start pecking at each other. And it can get vicious, like going for the eyes or tearing chunks out of each other's bodies. So in short, cannibalism. In fact, it's almost standard practice for breeders to trim the sharp tips of their beaks just to stop them from killing each other. One of the strangest things about this fact is that it appears more frequently in corn-fed ducks. So maybe there's something to be said for letting animals roam and, eat what they want. Things get even more horrifying with the story of the 1999 radiation accident. Hestie, a technician at the Tokaimura nuclear plant in Japan, was accidentally exposed to around 17 sieverts of radiation, enough to kill a person several times over. The exposure destroyed his chromosomes and shut down his body's ability to produce new cells, including skin, blood, and bone marrow. To their credit, his doctors did try to save him. At first. They gave him blood transfusions, stem cell transplants, even skin grafts, but his body just couldn't heal. Over the next few weeks, he lost almost all of his skin. He lived for a total of 83 days, mostly because doctors wanted to study what would happen, and the event turned into a deeply disturbing lesson in what radiation does to the human body. On a totally different note, most of us never stop to think about the millions of microscopic beings we share our bodies with. Research from the Belly Button Biodiversity Project found around 70 different species of bacteria living in the average person's belly button alone, including a few that we also use to make cheese. How about that? If you removed all the bacteria from your body, the pile would weigh about 7 ounces. That's almost half a pound of tiny stowaways. And if that's not personal enough, a kiss can transfer anywhere from 10 million to 1 billion bacteria in one go. Your gut alone holds trillions. Luckily, most of them are the good kind that does its best to keep you alive. Now, let's talk about how many people died last year. In 2024, about 62.4 million people died around the world. That works out to about 170,000 a day, 7,100 every hour, or roughly 2 every second. So, by the time you've watched this, dozens of people will have quietly slipped off the planet. Heart disease still tops the charts, claiming about 13% of all deaths. Stroke isn't far behind, and pneumonia takes out a couple of million more. Roughly 1.3 million people die in road accidents every year. Drowning, over 236,000. And here's the one that caught me off guard. More than 680,000 people die from falling. Statistically, you've got a 1 in 119 chance of falling to your death. So please, learn to swim, wear your seatbelt, and try not to do anything that would land you on a future list like this, because I like having you here. Moving on. Let's talk about the stuff they found floating around in the air of the New York subway system. Spoiler alert, it is so much more than dust. In 2007, a team tested the air on several platforms and found that 15% of it was made of human skin. Most of it was dead flakes from people's heels and heads. Probably a lot of psoriasis. But there were also bits that came from the commuters' belly buttons, armpits, ears, and butts. Yep. Then in 2024, another study came out that confirmed that the air down there now also contained high levels of PM 2.5, a short name for the pollution particles that can cause lung disease and even lung cancer. So if you're riding the subway and start feeling itchy or wheezy, try not to sneeze. All right, here's one to ruin seafood night. Lobsters pee out of their faces. And it's kind of romantic. For them, at least. They've got tiny urine-squirting nozzles under their eyes, and they use them to send chemical messages. Think little streams of lobster communication. During fights, male lobsters will pee directly at each other to determine dominance. And when it comes to mating, the females get involved too. A female will spray her own urine to let a male know she's interested. And if he is, she moves into his den, molts out of her shell, and mates. She'll stick around for about a week, still peeing, mostly to keep other females away, while her new exoskeleton hardens. And once it's firm enough, she'll go off to live on her own again. Give your kids the good old talk of the birds, the bees, and the lobsters. Meanwhile, scientists in Hawaii have discovered a caterpillar that dresses itself in the body parts of other insects and nicknamed it the bone collector. A creative bunch, aren't they? The moth larva makes its silk casing using bits of spiderweb and decorates it with dead and injured insects. Legs, wings, heads, whatever it can find lying around. Researchers believe it does this to both hide in plain sight and to steal prey from the spider. The bug is so strange that the entomologist Daniel Rubinoff has described it as, quote, very serial killer-esque. They've only come across 62 so far, which makes sense. I mean, even the spiders whose webs they use don't know they're there. Some things go unseen because they're small. Others stay invisible simply because we're not looking for them. Like a form of dementia that hits kids the way Alzheimer's hits adults. It's rare, but it exists. The two genetic disorders, Sanfilippo syndrome and Niemann-Pick disease, type C, are often called childhood Alzheimer's because they cause progressive brain damage. Children lose memory, motor skills, and the ability to communicate, just like adults with Alzheimer's, only it happens much faster. The conditions are fatal, and most kids affected won't survive to adulthood. There's no cure, and treatment mainly focuses on managing symptoms and trying to improve quality of life for as long as possible. On the other side of human loss is something colder and far more calculated. Back in 2013, Edward Snowden's leaks revealed that the NSA wasn't just eavesdropping on the world, it was actively hacking. One of the programs exposed was called Turbine, an automated system built to manage and control a growing network of malware implants. These implants let the NSA access data, monitor activity, and even remotely control devices, all with very little human oversight. Turbine also worked alongside another system called Turmoil, which filtered internet traffic and sent it back to NSA servers for analysis. Pretty bad, right? Well, since then, newer tools like Quantum Insert and Fox Acid have also been identified. And while the agency rarely comments on its methods, cybersecurity experts believe that their tactics have only become more advanced. Whether Turbine itself is still active isn't clear, but in 2024, Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which allows warrantless surveillance of foreigners, was reauthorized by Congress, despite major privacy concerns. So mass surveillance didn't stop with Snowden, it just got quieter. Let's move on from spying to science. In July 2024, researchers from Guy's and St. Thomas and King's College London found that patients with high levels of Fusobacterium, bacterium normally found in the mouth and gut, had significantly better outcomes when dealing with head and neck cancers. In lab tests, they added the bacteria to petri dishes filled with cancer cells, left them for a few days, and came back to find up to 99% of the cancer cells gone. Even more surprising, Fusobacterium is usually linked to worsening other cancers, like colorectal cancer. But in this case, it seemed to have the opposite effect. No one's 100% sure what's going on under the microscope, but the hope is that it could lead to a whole new kind of treatment for cancers in the mouth, throat, sinuses, and vocal cords. And then there's the other side of modern medicine. Between 1890 and 2010, the US carried out over 8,700 executions. Of those, 276 were officially classified as botched. That's more than 3%. Lethal injection, introduced as a more humane method, has had the highest failure rate of any execution method in US history, and it's still being used. In July 2022, Alabama took more than 3 hours to execute Joe Nathan James Jr. According to the reports, the medical team struggled to set an IV line, leaving behind multiple cuts, punctures, and open wounds, all while the clock ticked on. Now, obviously, I am not taking a stance for or against the death penalty, but the thing is that when executions fail the first time, and it does, it fails in ways no one should have to witness. From failed executions to failed ethics, we've all heard about the CIA's MKUltra program, the one where they experimented with mind control, hypnosis, and a lot of LSD. But did you know that as part of those experiments, they actually dosed a psychiatric patient with LSD every single day for 174 days straight? I know, I've already covered the poor elephant, but this one definitely deserves a mention. The test subject had no warning. He spent half a year being drugged out of his mind because the CIA wanted to see how long a brain could take it. He was in a hospital in Kentucky, and he had no idea what was being done to him. Most of MKUltra's records were destroyed in the 70s, but this case is one of the few that slipped through. And it shows just how far the agency was willing to push people without telling them a thing. Dr. Robert J. White took experimentation a step further and decided to transplant a living monkey's head onto a new body. In the 70s, White, a neurosurgeon, removed the head of one rhesus monkey and surgically attached it to the body of another. And somehow, the procedure worked. At least for a little while. The transplanted head regained consciousness. It could see, smell, taste, and hear, all using the blood supply from the new body. But spinal cord hadn't been reconnected, so the monkey was completely paralyzed from the neck down. It survived for 9 days before its immune system rejected the transplant and shut down. White later called it a success because technically the brain functioned. However, the ethical questions alone still hang over transplant research today. Okay, we've made it to the halfway mark, and you might be wondering what could possibly top government experiments in head transplants. Well, sadly, it's this. The world's youngest mother was just 5 years old when she gave birth. In 1939, Lena Medina was rushed to a hospital in Peru because of a rapidly growing stomach. Doctors discovered she was 7 months pregnant. She had a condition called precocious puberty, which meant her body started developing adult features as early as the age of 3. She gave birth via C-section to a healthy baby boy who was raised as her brother. And while the medical side is shocking enough, it's painfully clear that someone should have gone to jail. The whole case was handled with an incomprehensible level of secrecy, especially considering how serious the crime was. The father's identity was never made public. Sticking with things that make you feel sick, our next fact involves vomiting, but not in the way you're thinking. There's a rare medical condition where instead of throwing up food or bile, people can vomit up material that's supposed to exit from the other end of the digestive tract. It's called feculent vomiting, and while it's as unpleasant as it sounds, it usually means there's some serious blockage somewhere in the intestines. Most of the time it happens because of physical obstructions like tumors or twisted intestines. It can also result from something called paralytic ileus, where the digestive system just stops moving. It's incredibly rare and definitely one of those things you never expect to happen until it does. I should also mention the surgery that temporarily relocates part of your skull to your abdomen. No, really. It's done after something called a decompressive craniectomy, where doctors have to remove a piece of the skull to relieve pressure caused by brain swelling. That little piece of bone needs to be stored for later, obviously. So instead of freezing it, doctors will sometimes tuck it under the skin of the abdomen to keep it alive and sterile. The human body actually does a surprisingly good job of protecting the bone until it's safe to reattach. It lowers the risk of infection, avoids using artificial materials, and works better for long-term recovery. So once the swelling goes down, the bone comes out of storage and gets screwed back into place, like nothing ever happened. Of course, you don't need brain surgery to end up with something unusual in your body. The Cold War took care of that. Thanks to decades of above-ground nuclear testing in the 50s, anyone born in the US or Canada after 1951 has trace amounts of radioactive material in their bones. The tests released isotopes like strontium-90 into the atmosphere, which then settled into the food chain, and well, into us. Strontium mimics calcium, so the body stores it in bones, teeth, and even developing fetal tissue. Everyone born since then, including those of us born in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even the early 2000s, was still exposed to residual fallout. Researchers have found these isotopes in people's brains, eyes, and vital organs. Basically, everywhere. So yeah, if you were born in the last 70 years, congratulations, you probably got some Cold War dust in you. Unfortunately, our track record with other species isn't much better. Just ask sharks. Humans kill an estimated 100 million every year, whether through commercial fishing, sport, or bycatch from destructive gear like drift nets and fish aggregating devices. That number has led to a 70% drop in global shark populations over the last 50 years. And while shark fin soup usually gets the blame, it's not the only issue. Demand for shark meat, oil, and cartilage has exploded, turning sharks into a billion-dollar industry. They've basically gone from apex predator to heavily hunted product, and the ripple effects in ocean ecosystems have been disastrous. But environmental damage isn't the only kind of tragedy we leave behind. Some stories are quieter and far harder to shake. Our viewers here in the US will probably recognize this one, but for everyone else, it's a detail from Pearl Harbor most people outside of America have never heard about. On December 7th, 1941, the battleship West Virginia was hit during an attack and sank to the bottom of the harbor. The next day, as crews assessed the damage, they heard banging from inside the wreck, but there was nothing the Marines could do to help those trapped below. When the ship was finally raised a few months later, they discovered the remains of 3 sailors, Ronald Endicott, Lewis Costin, and Clifford Olds, sealed inside an airtight storeroom. They'd scratched marks on the wall to track the days. From what we know, they survived for 16 days, waiting for a rescue that never came. Which brings me to another kind of waiting that was probably just as haunting. In 1909, a 30-year-old mother by the name of Emma Hauk was admitted to a psychiatric hospital in Germany with what was then diagnosed as schizophrenia. She ended up spending the next 11 years in institutions, completely isolated from her former life. After she passed, the hospital staff discovered a stack of letters that she'd written by hand, all addressed to her husband. The pages were completely filled, edge to edge, with the same phrase repeated over and over. "Sweetheart, come." None of the letters were ever mailed. Anyway, shifting from emotionally devastating to just devastating, I'm probably about to destroy a particular museum exhibit for you forever. Since 1956, kids in Chicago have been crowding around the chick hatchery at the Museum of Science and Industry, watching baby chicks break out of the shells in real time. It has been a staple for decades. These days, the exhibit also covers genetics and DNA. About 20 chicks hatch every day. That's roughly 8,000 a year. Now, here's where it gets unpleasant. Well, as CBS News Chicago reported in 2016, a few, specifically the rare Java breed, get sent to a farm in La Fox, Illinois, where they're allowed to live out their lives. However, most of the chicks, primarily the white leghorns, are sent to the Lincoln Park Zoo, where they're euthanized and fed to carnivores like lions, snakes, crocodiles, vultures, and owls. Since we're almost done, let's circle back to another rare disease that affects kids. Have you ever heard of Lesch-Nyhan syndrome? It's a genetic disorder that shows up early in childhood and forces children to do something unimaginable: hurt themselves. And I'm not talking about tantrums or behavioral issues. I'm talking about compulsive, uncontrollable self-mutilation. Children with Lesch-Nyhan often bite their own lips, fingers, and tongues, despite feeling every second of the pain. It can get so bad that they have to be physically restrained. Almost all of these children suffer permanent injuries, and since there's no cure, it takes a lifetime of effort to manage the damage and keep them safe. And number 2 on our list today, we're heading to a part of the world where being born different can be a death sentence. In some parts of Africa, people with albinism are targeted in ritualistic attacks. And I don't mean metaphorically, but literally. You see, there's a widespread belief in certain communities that albino body parts bring wealth, good fortune, or magical powers. And that has turned people with albinism into walking targets. Tanzania, Malawi, and other countries have seen horrifying attacks. Children abducted, graves robbed, all because of superstition and greed. Organizations in those regions are actively working to change people's minds through education, advocacy, and protection programs. But to undo centuries of folklore and fear takes time. Finally, if you're not creeped out yet, I have got a disturbing visual for you. Observations have shown that unborn babies can cry or react when they're startled. Not audibly, of course, but using 4D ultrasound, researchers have seen it happen. The facial grimacing, the open mouth, the chest movements, even the recovery breathing afterward. Everything that says crying, just without the sound. Because their lungs are filled with fluid, so, I don't know, maybe it's like suffocating? That part's actually worse the more you think about it. So yes, it's entirely possible for an unborn baby to be crying, distressed, uncomfortable, and completely unheard. Creepy doesn't even begin to cover it. And that's a wrap. Sorry. Which one disturbed you the most? Or is there a fact that you think we should try to unhear? Let me know in the comments below, because I am always reading, and sometimes regretting. And if you're still in the mood for the kind of facts that ruin your peace of mind, check out our related video, 150 jaw-dropping facts you definitely won't learn in school. It's filled with weird history, surprising science, and a bunch of stuff you definitely didn't get from your textbooks. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and I'll catch you again next time. See ya.